Hi again, everybody. Miss Wiehl here from HAAS, teaching a little bit about 5th grade adaptations today. This is the second part of our 4th installment, in which we are covering slides 28 through 32, and we're talking about aquatic environments. In the first section, we talked a little bit about freshwater environments and the zones that we could find in those, and we talked a little bit about rivers. So we left off talking about salmon and their migrational patterns and why it makes sense for them to do that. Okay. The next aquatic environment that I would like to talk about is wetland environments. And this actually happens to be some of my favorite environments because, as some of you know, I used to work out in the Everglades for a long time, and I love studying the animals and the plants living out in these wetlands. Now, there are a bunch of different types of wetlands. A wetland, as you can see, vocabulary word, is an area of land covered by a shallow layer of water for most of the year. So that means sometimes it dries up. As a matter of fact, I went out into the Everglades last weekend. Don't tell anybody. But it's so dry out there that it is currently not covered in water. It is all very dry right now because we're in our dry season. I think usually right around May 30th starts the beginning of hurricane season and rain season. So we'll start seeing the wetlands starting to become a little bit more wet pretty soon. But there are a few types of wetlands, not just the Everglades. The Everglades would be considered, technically speaking, a river of grass. But for the sake of this course, we're going to call it a wetland, a marsh. Okay, usually marshes are areas that don't contain trees. So if you're looking at this image of the Everglades, you see that there are a bunch of different cypress trees, okay, and different types of plants, but you can see trees. So this would not be considered a marsh. A marsh would be more like a grassland that's covered with a little bit more water. So there are some parts of the Everglades that are marshes, and there are some places in the Everglades where it's more swampy or bog-like. Okay, bogs tend to be covered in a layer of thick mud, and swamps are actually like the image here would actually be considered a swamp. These are wetlands with forests as well. So the trees actually live in the water, okay, which is pretty cool because you don't see a lot of trees living in the water. But these trees have adaptations to allow them to survive being in such a wet environment. Okay, so make sure you get your vocabulary. Make sure you know the difference between what a wetland, a marsh, a swamp, a bog is. These are very important words, and they don't always mean the same thing. So make sure you make yourself some flashcards on that. But since I happen to love the Everglades so much, I have another quick video for you that I'd like to show you about the Everglades. So hang on over here. All right, let's check it on out. Okay, so that's more of a marshland. As you can see, there aren't really a lot of trees. That's part of the Everglades. Okay, and then over here we can see grasses like sawgrass and cattail. As you can see, there are areas with some trees, so we'd start calling those more swamp areas. As you head out to Florida Bay, where the water gets to be a little bit more, all right, a little bit deeper, you can find a lot of aquatic creatures such as manatees. And on the land, you can find endangered species like the Florida panther. As a matter of fact, scientists currently believe there's only about 200 of these living in the entire world, and they're found right here in Florida. It's unfortunate because their population has been really decreasing in the past 30 years or so because they've been getting hit by a lot of cars. Ugh. And here are my favorite creatures in the Everglades, the Florida alligators, of course. I think they're adorable. A lot of people think that they're a little bit creepy, but I've studied them for a long, long time. And, you know, you have to love all animals, but I have a special place in my heart for these guys. As you can see, alligators aren't actually green like they are in most cartoons. They're actually black. And that helps them to absorb sunlight because dark colors absorb light even better. So because alligators are cold-blooded, they have the ability to warm up. Oh, and dolphins. You'll find those out by Florida Bay as well. And as you could see, dolphins, they actually have a behavioral adaptation where they hunt in packs so that they can help each other out so that they can all get their energy from eating food. Did you know that we have deer here in Florida as well? Yeah, we have white-tailed deer and key deer that will actually be found walking around. And look at the little baby. Little babies have those little white spots to help them camouflage better in the grasses. And once they grow up, they lose their spots because they can now fend for themselves. So look at the difference between mama and baby. Pretty cool and adorable. Sharks. Yes, of course, we have sharks too. We also have crocodiles as well, but I don't think they show them in this video. But yeah, Florida Everglades is one of the only places in the entire world where you can find alligators, crocodiles, and sharks all living in the same environment. Pretty cool, right? Oh man, we also have lots of different types of birds, such as great blue herons, great white egrets, and even this fishing bird, the osprey. Look at some of his cool adaptations: sharp talons, sharp beak, just like the eagle that we were talking about at the beginning of the PowerPoint. So all great adaptations to help them to survive. Okay, so that's that. Let's go back to our PowerPoint. So those are some examples of wetland environments. The last thing that I'd like to talk to you about, which honestly I'm surprised there's only one slide on it, is about saltwater environments. So we're talking about the ocean now. And I know that we all know a lot about the ocean because we live very close to the ocean. But just like we talk about freshwater environments and how they have different zones, and an organism needs to be adapted to whatever zone of the lake it's living in, organisms also have to be adapted to living in the zone of the saltwater environment. Also, you don't really think about it a lot, but these organisms have to be adapted to living in a salty environment. I'll tell you a brief, quick story about how I learned that organisms in saltwater don't do so well in freshwater. I'd bought myself a lobster and I was planning to eat him. But before that, I wanted him to have a nice life. So what I did was I put him out in my bathtub and filled it up with water, thinking, okay, he'll just swim around there, and then when it's time for dinner tonight, that'll be his end. Well, I didn't know too much about saltwater versus freshwater, and actually, I unfortunately ended up killing my lobster very early because the lobster could not survive very well in a freshwater environment. And I learned a very important lesson about osmosis and cellular transport that day. And I ended up exploding a lobster. Yeah, it's pretty intense story, and I'm not going to get into it too much, but you have to realize that freshwater and saltwater are not the same thing. You have to be adapted to living in the area that you're living in. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the zones. If you're looking at the bottom of the page, you can see it says match each zone with its description. So just like the lakes and the freshwater environments have zones, we also have zones in the ocean as well. So we're going to start with the photic zone. Photic, like photo, like photosynthesis, means light, right? If you take a photo, it's capturing light in an image. So the photic zone of the ocean is anywhere where light can penetrate the water. So if you're looking at the images above my screen right here, you see how the water is nice and light. You can actually see light is penetrating through the water, and you can actually see these creatures, okay? However, remember, if we're swimming down deeper and deeper, we're going to hit a zone at one point where we're not going to be able to see anything, because as we go deeper and deeper, it's darker and darker and darker, and colder and more pressure. So as we travel downwards, it gets so dark that at some point, light can no longer reach. And we call that the aphotic zone. Slap an A in front of the word means not. So no light in this zone. And of course, without light, we know that you won't really find plants in that area because plants need light to make food. So you won't find a lot of plants, and you'll find a lot less animals in the aphotic zone as well. However, if you're looking below, you can see some examples of organisms that have adapted to living in areas where light is not really a common thing. So by looking at this fish, you can see that he's actually got bioluminescence. He can create light with his body to help attract prey right? To find food, or mates, right? To find a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Okay. And last but not least, if you travel down and it's getting so dark, it's getting so deep, but eventually you hit the floor of the ocean. And by the way, scientists have just started exploring this ecosystem, but there's a really cool ecosystem down there called hydrothermal vents. And that would be on the deep ocean floor. So basically, scientists only recently discovered a new ecosystem. And by recently, I mean, I'm talking, this ecosystem was discovered in 1977. Okay, so that's older than me, but that's not older than my mom. So that tells us a lot about it. So let me show you a little clip of some scientists that have taken a submersible device. So they're actually down there and they're observing some of these hydrothermal vents. What we're looking at right now is called a black smoker. As you can see, it's releasing hot gases from the center of the earth. Remember the layers of the earth? We have the crust, and then below that we have an area with magma and lava, right? And it's super hot. And if there's a crack in the crust, that magma can escape and form a volcano. Well, you can think of these things as technically underwater volcanoes. So actually, if I was to put the sound on, you would hear the scientists saying, we can't get too close to the black smoker or else it's gonna melt our submersible vessel. So that's how hot those smokers are. And because it's so cold and there's no light down at the bottom of the ocean, now that we have heat and chemicals rising up from inside the earth, it actually provides an area for organisms to live. So you're seeing some crabs, some worms, some little tiny organisms that are living deep, deep down at the bottom of the ocean. And by the way, the little worms that are living in these tiny tubes, these are actually the organisms that they found fossilized 4 billion years ago. So a lot of scientists, even though we just learned about this ecosystem like 50 years ago, this is like the newest ecosystem that we know of. It actually may be the oldest ecosystem on our planet. So that's pretty cool. Anyways, I encourage you to do a little bit more studying on this topic. But for now, I'm going to have to say goodbye to you guys. Good luck studying our aquatic environments. If you have any questions, reach out to me or your science teachers, and have a beautiful day. Bye.